Hi there, welcome to the last benchmark of body systems for our Human Body Systems project. This is the last benchmark, and instead of having a benchmark 7 quiz, at the end of this week, you are going to take the post test, and then we get to start the frog dissection. So pay no attention to the dates. I'm not going to worry about the dates in the slideshow. This is from last year, but I will link these slides for you if you want to get to some of the links within it. So the endocrine system, which is very closely related to our reproductive system, is a very, very complex system to study. In fact, when I took physiology in college, I remember learning more about hormones and how they control our body than anything else. And if you recall, our driving question was how body systems help to regulate homeostasis. And if I had to take a guess, I would say that probably the endocrine system has more control over homeostasis than a lot of the other systems. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how hormones, which is the product of the endocrine system, controls certain body processes. We'll identify where our endocrine glands are located throughout the body. And we're going to talk about negative feedback controls. And I actually am going to keep all of the assignments that we normally would have done for benchmark 7 for our distance learning. So this link right here to my lesson plan might be very helpful for you during this week. This is the only video lesson that I'm going to provide for benchmark 7. All right, so there are actually several locations in the body where endocrine glands are found. Endocrine glands and organs all make or manufacture a very specific chemical we call hormones. So hormones are just simply chemicals that can control activities in the body. They are carried through the bloodstream, and it really is the ultimate system for homeostasis. So let's look at a few of the glands that are talked about in this picture. The hypothalamus is a gland that's in your brain. And if you were able to watch Osmosis Jones, which we would have watched in class, the pathogen character in the movie Thrax is trying to get to the hypothalamus to take that out of the brain. The hypothalamus secretes a lot of different hormones that control things like fluid balance, muscle contraction, and it can actually regulate temperature in the body as well. All right, there's another gland in the brain called the pituitary gland. Okay, and it actually controls other glands in the body. It can control reproductive organs, and it actually produces or creates a hormone that produces melanin production. Okay, a lot of people they recognize the thyroid gland. They've heard the word thyroid before. A lot of people have thyroid problems, and that's definitely something that a lot of people deal with. If your thyroid gland produces too much or too little of the thyroid hormone, it can really mess with your metabolism. So sometimes people can either be very, very skinny or overweight or feel very lethargic, and they take medicine to help their thyroid produce that hormone. Some people have such an overactive thyroid gland that they actually have to have their gland killed, and then they just take a supplement of that hormone for the rest of their life. That's called Graves' disease. That would be a good one to study in the disorders pit stop if we had one more to do. Your adrenal glands sit right on top of your kidneys. So there's one on each kidney. They control a lot of our metabolism. They actually produce hormones during times of stress. So a lot of times those are called stress hormone releasing. Your pancreas releases hormones to regulate sugar in the blood. Okay, pancreas is involved with making insulin. So if you're diabetic, you are very interested in learning about your pancreas. Okay, pineal gland is another one in the brain that's actually in charge of your circadian rhythm. So knowing when it's day and night and when to go to sleep. Parathyroid are on the other side of the thyroid, and they also regulate body fluids. And then these are considered secondary functions of the endocrine system. The heart actually can secrete hormones in regulating blood volume. Okay, the thymus is farther down the trachea, and that can coordinate response of the immune system. Your digestive tract can secrete hormones. Your kidneys can. And then the reproductive glands that are in males and females, so testes in males and ovaries in females, are the glands that produce what's considered sex hormones. So what do hormones do? Hormones are really just a chemical, a molecule, atoms stuck together. We have them in our blood all the time, in our tissues, and they're usually created by a secreting cell, and then a different cell receives them. Okay, that would be called the target cells. They have special receptors to kind of grab onto those hormones, and then they'll change their functions based on that. So your nervous system can actually trigger a response to say, hey, we need to release these hormones from a gland. So here's a really good example of the fight or flight response. So imagine you're in grave danger. Somebody is coming at you with a knife. The eyes send that information to the brain. The brain sends information directly to an endocrine gland so that adrenaline is released. Adrenaline will do some things for you real quick. Increase blood flow, increase your heart rate, and that is your fight or flight response. It's directly related to hormone response. And all of our hormones are matched up to specific cells that are called target cells, where only certain hormones will have an effect on certain parts of the body. So the hormones and target cells work together just like a lock and a key. Now, our hormones in our bloodstream work generally, almost all of them, work in what's called a negative feedback loop. So there has to be some stimulus, like in the last example, somebody coming at you with a knife, to trigger this response. And when the initial stimulus is gone, your body stops releasing those hormones. So if you are really, really scared and you had adrenaline pumping through your body, eventually you return to a state of normal. You're not scared anymore. Your body stops releasing adrenaline. Just imagine if you couldn't get that feeling to go away. Your body has a way of shutting that thing down. So you definitely want hormones to stop being secreted when the stimulus is gone. So this is like the general outline of a negative feedback loop. You have a stimulus, something sensors, like most often your brain or your eyes or whatever, senses that stimulus. Control is activated, and something happens. So here's your other example. Let's say you have a fever. Okay, you're sick and you have a fever. Your nerve cells in your skin and eventually your brain recognize, whoa, we are too hot. The temperature regulatory center in the brain can actually activate your sweat glands to cool you down. All right, that's pretty cool, right? So once you're cooled down and your body doesn't recognize the need for sweat, the sweat actually goes away. All right, so this is a negative feedback loop. Okay, so how can I relate this to real life? Negative feedback loops in the body are kind of like flushing a toilet, okay? So here's the stimulus. You flush the toilet. What happens next? Well, you want your toilet to be ready for the next flush, right? So the toilet has to go through a series of steps until the initial stimulus is gone. And why doesn't the toilet just completely overflow every time you flush it and the water turns on? Here we go. I forgot to put in that flow chart. Okay, so the stimulus is flushing the toilet. It activates the control. This flapper comes up and empties the toilet. This float will rise until the toilet tank is full, which has a lever action that actually turns off the water. Okay, so once the toilet bowl is full, the toilet shuts off the water. Okay, sorry, I forgot to put that flow chart in there. All right, here is a really good example of one of the body's only positive feedback loops. So we've just been talking about negative feedback loops. So your hormones are activated until the stimulus is gone. Adrenaline pumps until the the danger is over. Your body says you need to sweat until you're not hot anymore. So those are all mechanisms to eventually turn off the initial sensor. There's only a handful of positive feedback loops where releasing of the hormone actually makes more hormone get released. And this is during childbirth. So the stimulus is the process to begin childbirth. Okay, so what happens when it's time for a mother to go into labor to deliver her child? The main hormone is produced by the mother from the fetus. It's called oxytocin. Okay, estrogen, which is another female hormone from the ovaries, is also involved here, but it's mainly oxytocin. So this hormone is released and it stimulates the uterus to contract. So the baby's in the uterus and the baby needs to be born. And so this muscular wall has to squeeze so the baby can be born. Now, once this process is started, it really can't stop until the baby's born. And some mothers have induced labor. They actually can give mothers a synthetic form of oxytocin to kind of start that process. Sometimes moms in labor will kind of stop progressing and they need a little boost of oxytocin to progress labor. So once this is started, it needs to stop. So oxytocin will stimulate the uterus to contract. It will also stimulate the placenta, which is this right here. This connects the baby and the umbilical cord to the wall of the uterus, makes prostaglandins, which stimulates more contraction of the uterus. And every time the uterus contracts, more oxytocin is produced and it keeps feeding into itself. So this is why it's called a positive feedback loop. Instead of turning the stimulus off, it actually keeps increasing it. So that's good for childbirth because we need more oxytocin and the uterus needs to continue to contract so that the baby is born. Now, once the baby is born and the placenta has been delivered, then this feedback loop is over. All right, so here's what you need to do for one of the first activities. I'm actually going to continue with my slides, but I do have a vocab worksheet, which will be linked here and in the agenda, for you to go over some of the different glands, what they do, and what they produce. So this is a vocab worksheet that you're going to need to do for your first graded activity. Now, I'm not saying you have to watch all of these crash course because there's a lot of them, but I will tell you that at least the first one is really great to understand endocrine systems. Okay, because I'm not going to lie. Understanding feedback loops of hormones can be very, very complex, and I don't want you to get too overwhelmed with this. Okay, so let's recall how hormones and target cells work together. Remember, it's like a lock and a key. Hormones only affect their target cells. All right, so we're going to look a little bit more closely at the reproductive endocrine systems for males and females. So please, please, please note, I'm going to talk about the human reproductive system as it relates to the endocrine. Okay, I'm not going to discuss sex education. We're not going to discuss external anatomy of male and female reproductive systems, but some of the cross sections to show the reproductive glands are pictures of the human body. So I just remember teaching this last year. It was not a big deal. And we're just going to go about our business because it's science. Okay, so there are glands for the male reproductive system in the testes. Okay, so that's the main area where the hormone is created. There's one main male hormone for reproductive purposes, and that's testosterone. Now, some people think that females don't have testosterone. They actually do have a little bit of it, but it's mainly in males in those high levels. It's made in the testes, and it actually controls quite a few things that aren't related to reproduction. For instance, increased testosterone will increase your bone mass. Okay, so generally speaking, males have higher bone mass. Fat and muscle distribution is controlled by testosterone. And then the reproductive part of testosterone is to produce sperm cells, which are in the testes here. All right, so you just need to know the location of the testes. Okay, female reproductive hormones are quite a bit more complicated than male hormones. They're actually produced, the hormones for reproduction in females, all over the body, including in the brain, in the hypothalamus and pituitary, and in the ovaries. So the ovary is kind of like the female counterpart to the testes. All right. So in addition to a little bit of testosterone, there's also estrogen and progesterone. And then during pregnancy, a different kind of hormone is created. It's called HCG, or human chorionic gonadotropin. I know hormones have great names. So really, really cool fact about reproduction. Female human beings are born with all the egg cells they're ever going to have, right in each ovary. When a female is born, she has all the egg cells she's ever going to have. And at the onset of puberty, hormones will start to control the process of ovulation, which will basically release, on average, one mature egg once a month into the fallopian tube, into the uterine lining, and that is midway part of the menstrual cycle, which, if the egg is fertilized, will develop into a fetus. So very, very complicated process of hormones throughout the entire menstrual cycle that controls the reproductive processes. And there's lots and lots to learn about that. Okay, so I will be uploading 2 coloring sheets for you so that you can understand a little bit more about the 2 reproductive glands, so testes and ovaries, and those will be uploaded for you. The third and final activity for the endocrine system is a close and critical reading activity. It's actually some activities that are not related to the human system, but these are really, really cool. You are going to look at some scientific research that says that sex determination in reptiles may be affected by temperature and climate change. Very, very interesting. So what they're saying is the temperature outside can have an effect on the eggs either developing into male or female reptiles. And this is affecting turtles in Michigan right now. All right, so you are going to be reading one of the 3 articles. And you know what? If you want to read all 3 of them, that's awesome. You can definitely do that. But the concern overall with people studying this is that if we have too many male or too many female reptiles, that could affect breeding in populations. Okay, so I will post the links for the articles and a place for you to write a response after reading one of those articles. And now we are at the end of the project. I can't believe we've actually made it to the end of the project. There is a little bit of work to do for benchmark 7, but no quiz. Review your pretest if you took it. You can study with that. You can go back to your study guides, use the online tests. I'm going to post a link to the study guide, and I'm sorry, not the study guide, the post test, because there isn't one big study guide. And you are going to be taking your post test online, multiple choices, multiple turns, I should say. You can take it as many times as you want. And then we will enter into the last phase of this project, which is the frog dissection.